Hello stampers, and welcome. Today we're going to be working with the DaisyLane stamp set and the small, or shall I say the smaller of the two daisy punches. And if you want to see the final card that we're making, this is it. It's actually a fancy fold card, and the base of the card has been made using one of the designer series sheets from the Garden Lane designer series paper. Before we carry on, let me just say that this is a card that I'm actually casing. Not the whole card, I'm casing the fold of the card. One of our fellow demonstrators made a beautiful one using the sailing suite that's come out. And I, because it is summer at the moment, am just loving working with flowers, so I've decided to use the DaisyLane set. So if I put this aside for a minute, I said that I'm using designer series paper, and usually it comes in a 12 by 12 sheet. So this is the pack, 12 by 12 inch. I'm sorry it can't fit on the full screen. And I have taken one of those sheets and cut it at 4 inches, and its length obviously is 12 inches. So the starting point for the card is a piece of designer series paper that measures 4 inches by 12 inches. That also means you're going to be able to make 3 cards out of one sheet of designer paper. So step 1 is to do our scoring. And the first score point is at 1 3/4 inches. Then we score at 4 3/4 inches. And then we score at 8 inches. So now that our score lines are all done, I'm going to use the bone folder to actually fold these creases and just make sure that we get a nice crisp edge. So in fact, it's a little easier if I turn it upside down, because then I can see what I'm actually doing. So that's my first fold. The next fold is on this score line. So I'm going to crease that. And then the final fold is on that crease line there. There we are. Now, depending on which side of this paper you prefer, you can actually use either that as the outside color, or you can reverse it. And then all you need to do is fold your score lines in the reverse direction. So now that we've got all those folds in, I'll just give it one final crease. Setting that aside, the remaining pieces of paper that you'll need to cut, and this is the final card that we're making. So if we just look at these strips quickly, you're going to need a piece of white cardstock that measures 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches, because that still gives you a very neat little border around the edge. And then for this panel, we're going to use a piece that's 1.5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And that still leaves us a little panel on either side. And the final little strip for the sentiment, or that I stamped the sentiment on, is measured 1/2 inch by 2.5 inches. Right, let's get down to business now, stamping out our flowers. I looked for a color combination that would match the designer paper, but that would also actually bring in a little bit of color. So one of the background colors in this designer paper is mint macaron. So we'll be using mint macaron to stamp one of the daisies. I've colored the centers using Daffodil Delight, and then besides stamping the daisies, I'm using one of the Stampin' Blend pens, and I'm using the dark Daffodil Delight. And the final color is Flirty Flamingo for the daisies. Inside the leaves, I've actually stamped using Garden Green. So let's get to business. To speed it up, I have actually pre-stamped and pre-punched out the daisies that we'll be using. So if I just lay those aside there, and if I take a piece of blank paper, I just want to show you how easy it is to actually stamp these daisies and punch them out. So applying my stamp set to the ink pad and then to my white paper, you can see the image that's been stamped. And all that's left now is for me to take my punch and to line it up with the daisy that I've stamped. I have to press the punch so that it gives the maneuverability that I need to make sure that I've got it properly lined up. So almost there. There we go. And all I do is then press down. And hey, presto, I've got myself a daisy. I've taken these daisies, and on one of the two I punch out for each of the sets of flowers that I'm creating, I take my stamping blend pen and I literally just quickly colour that centerpiece. So, flowers all done. What's left now is actually the stamping before we start sticking everything together. It's as simple as that. So using my 3/4 by 3/4 piece of paper, I'm using garden green, and I am using that stem out of the DaisyLane bundle. So I ink up, and I want to do these at a bit of an angle because, as you can see in that final card that we're making, I'm just positioning them in the corner, and I need a slight bend to those stems. So first one, I'm going to stamp off the paper to allow space for the daisy. So if I stamp it there, and then the next stem I will stamp just a little bit to the left of that, probably about there. Excellent. So those are my two stems. Now I'm going to stamp the daisies. So I'm going to use Flirty Flamingo, ink up, and I'm going to stamp this off the page a little bit. There we go. So you can see part of the petals have just popped off the page there. So let's just give this stamp a very quick clean before I pop it in a different colour. There we are, giving that a wipe. And I'm now going to work with the Daffodil Delight. So there we go. Let's ink up Daffodil Delight, and we'll do it probably at an angle there. Excellent. So now that I've got the daisy stamped, I'm using my blends pen, and as you can see, it's just a quick squiggle in the middle, and I'm colouring the centre of those daisies. Right. Daisies all done and coloured. I would like to now stamp the sentiment. I'm using the word smile, and that's just as you open the card, it's going to pop out with that word smile, and it still gives you the scope to actually write your own message around the word smile. I'm using Memento ink and quickly inking that up. And let's stamp our greeting, smile. If you're not sure which direction the stamp is going to stamp, you can always test it on the piece of paper next to you, and you'll see whether you've got it the right way up. So there we go. Greeting stamped, all ready for sticking into our card. Next step is to take our thinner panel of white paper, and in this case we want to be stamping a daisy and we want a stem. Well, you've got the choice of either stamping the daisies, or you can actually stamp and punch them out and then stick them in, which is what I've chosen to do because I'm using two stamped daisies that I layer on top of each other. And when we assemble the card, you'll see exactly what I mean. So using the garden green ink again and using my stem, I'm going to stamp at an angle. There we are. Oops, made a mistake. You know what? It's as simple as that. Just turn it over and use the other side. I never waste anything like that. So there we go. Little more pressure, and now I've actually stamped the full image. Great. So almost finished with our stamping. The last piece that we have to do and stamp is our final little greeting on that very slim piece of paper. And I'm going to again use Memento ink or black ink for this message, and I can line it up there. You'll see that I haven't actually cut that to size yet. If I place that on my card, I'm going to chop that little bit off on the end. So if you were to measure this very accurately, remember I said it's a strip that's 1/2 inch by 2.5 inches. And now the very last step is literally just to assemble all our flowers. And I've used a wet glue. So if I get all the daisy pieces, the first one I'm going to pop on the card are mint macaron. And now you'll see what I mean about actually using 2 sets of daisies. I've stamped out 2 sets of daisies. I've layered the top one by actually just popping some Daffodil Delight in the center of that one. There we go. So we just offset those. Great. Then I'm going to apply the Flirty Flamingo ones. See, there the 2 daisies are. One's got a center that's colored in, so that'll be my top one, and this is the base one. So again, just a little daub of glue, and that's literally all it needs, just a tiny little daub of glue. And we can pop the top layer on. Goodness, hasn't this heat wave just been phenomenal? I was so relieved today that there was actually a bit of cloud cover finally later in the day, because it just meant there was a little bit of respite from that intense heat, and it made a welcome change. So our slim narrow panel goes in that center piece. There we are. And now we can pop our yellow daisies onto that. So exactly the same process steps. I've actually stamped 2 daisies. I'm putting the one with the blank center, as it were, down first on my card, and then I'm going to apply the one that I've colored in the center bit, and I offset that. There we go. Oopsie. That's the brilliant thing about wet glue. You can still maneuver it. Then I can take my sentiment, and I just want to glue a tiny little section because we're just going to stick it to that end there. So just pop a little bit of glue on that edge. There we go. There's the sentiment. And then our final panel, which says smile. And we just run a little bit of wet glue along that. And hey presto, we're almost there. And you can set that in the center so that it gives you a little bit of a border of the designer paper all around the edges that frames it. And there you go. That's the card, all done. Can you believe that was really quick and easy to make? And isn't that just bright and cheerful? I hope you've enjoyed crafting with me in this session. Remember to go and find my shop at DianneRichardsonCraft.Stampin'Up.net. And I hope that you join me soon again and have fun making this bright card.